You enter the town. It's a quaint, quiet place. There are people milling about in the front, and there are some that seem like they're headed into a tavern. You see a group of halflings and dragonborns chatting with one another as they walk into what appears to be a blacksmith's shop, at least based on the man outside hammering on an anvil. In the distance, though, you see plumes of gray smoke at what look like the city limits toward the south end of town. And from that direction, a frantic halfling runs at you. Help! Help! My farm! It's on fire! Please! In this series called Drop-In Adventures, I want to provide small adventures for other DMs that could work either as one-shots or work in more modular campaigns. My current game is, to borrow 4th edition terminology, a points of light setting. It's completely homebrew. There's some inspiration from folklore and fairy tales, but my players wanted to have more of a sense of randomness in this game. So we decided to use this points of light style where I'd be able to pull in different adventures as I came up with them or as I rolled them on encounter tables. And I noticed that online in the D&D community, there's a lot of written modules that people have created, but I haven't seen a lot of video content in the same vein. So I wanted to provide that. I'm making it or adapting it or tweaking it for my own game, and I have plenty of ideas that I'm not incorporating into my own game, so I feel like the least I can do is provide rather than just take. This first drop-in adventure acts as a sort of introduction to D&D or D&D combat and D&D encounters. It's designed for levels 1 to 3, and the recommended party size is 3 to 4 player characters. Now I have a PDF in the description of this adventure. Now, I've only ever written D&D content for myself, so if you do happen to look at this or use it, please give me feedback about what I could do better, how I could make it clearer, or what information would also be beneficial in terms of providing it to you. Again, I've only ever done it for me. For this adventure, I wanted to provide a different flavor of a level 1 encounter that wasn't just goblins attack, right? I also wanted to avoid the damsel in distress cliche about someone bursting into a tavern because their daughter or wife or girlfriend was stolen. So I decided to create an encounter where a farmer, and in my campaign it was a farmer who was a pretty high up person in the town, had an incident occur at his farm, and his farm was on fire. The PCs, and my player characters are normally pretty good about taking the bait, would then rush over and help the farmer do a couple of things. Put out the fires, but also deal with the farm animals. Now in my campaign, the animals were actually the indirect cause of the fire. What happened was a vanguard or renegade potion seller came through town and accidentally dropped some potions at the farmer's farm. And these potions had random effects, but the animals got into the potions. The potion seller was just trying to sow discord and chaos, and I mean, boy howdy, it worked. So when the PCs arrive, not only do they have to deal with a farm that's on fire, they also have to deal with chickens that can breathe fire, or cows that can go into a light-style barbarian rage. And it provides an opportunity for the player characters to actually perform combat, but also, and I didn't even expect this when I first wrote it, kind of solve a puzzle. Because depending on how they approach this, they can obviously just kill all the animals and maybe get a small reward from the farmer. But that does remove the farmer's livelihood, right? And they also have the opportunity to put out the fires and subdue the farm animals, which is what my player characters ended up doing. I thought that this was a brilliant solution, and it treated this otherwise just combat encounter as more of a puzzle as well. And this meant that the farmer, the owner of this place, actually know how to vested interest in these player characters, right? Like, not only did they put out the fire, they also saved his livelihood. And that kind of gave them a good renown in the city. Like I said, in the description, I have a PDF of this provided. But the way that it works is the PCs would either overhear the farmer talking to a town guard about what happened, or they would see the smoke in the horizon, and they would, or even, heck, the farmer could approach them directly. But if they take the bait, they would approach the farm. Now, in the description, in the document, I linked a map made by Dice Grimorium of a farm, and you could very easily use that. I just quickly drew something. I play with maps and minis at my table. My friends just find it a lot more engaging. And even when I do play on virtual tabletops, I do the same. So I set up the map and I picked sections of the farm that were actually on fire. And this gave an opportunity for the players to see exactly the chaos that was happening. And then I populated it with creatures. Some of the farm animals in my game were aggressive, while others were more docile. Some were just trying to run off, some were actually trying to attack the party. And once the player characters arrive, then you set up the map, you set up which farm animals are going to be aggressive, which aren't, what have you. And the way that I did this, and I provided these stat blocks for this in the module, I created, or I kind of modified some existing very low level, like I think they're 1/4 or 0 CR monsters, and I just reflavored them a little bit. So I think I based the chicken off of an owl, for instance. But I also provided in that same document a modification table. Like I said, in my game, the fire was caused by the animals themselves because of this potion seller. So I wanted a way for this combat to feel a little bit more engaging. And what I did was I rolled random modifications to the creatures that my party was fighting. Some of them could breathe fire that was based off of the Dragonborn breath weapon. Some of them could go into a sort of barbarian style rage. And it gave I don't remember what animal had it, but it gave them advantage on attacks and a small bonus to damage. Some of them could teleport. And I came up with more of these. I provided, I think, 4 of them in the description. So you could roll a d4 and then assign it to your creatures, or you could just pick which one you think. Like in my brain, having a chicken that could throw fire is just hilarious. But you could also have, just as an example, and this isn't in the modification table, you could have a chicken that essentially could cast the firebolt cantrip, but it's them, the chicken, throwing a fire egg, like a flaming egg. Like, there's a lot of flexibility here. And I guess I can kind of go into how my party solved this problem, right? So my party is a mouse folk fighter, a gnome artificer, a changeling bard, and a human wizard. And the way that it played out in my game was it was a ribbon cutting ceremony at these sister cities. So everyone was outside, they were playing party games. I was actively trying to avoid the start in a tavern thing, only because I've done it the past few times. And heck, this adventure could work in that way as well. I mean, a farmer could rush into a tavern and ask for help because his farm is on fire. But my players overheard the mayor of the town talking to his assistant, who was looking frantic. And the assistant was saying, like, hey, you got to wrap this up. We need to get back to your place. There's something going on with your animals. And my player characters took up this plot hook. So they decided to run back with the farmer. And when they got there, they all approached it differently. They helped each other, obviously, but I remember the bard attempting to put some of the farm animals to sleep. The wizard was using Tensor's floating disc, as well as Mage Hand, to help bring water around to the different parts of the farm to assist with putting the fires out. So they weren't directly in combat with the animals. They were still in initiative order, but they were using their actions to put out the fire so it wouldn't spread. And I didn't even think of that. Like, that didn't cross my mind. I thought that this would just be like, go in, kill the animals, and leave. But their solution was so much more engaging to me because they treated the farmer like a real person. They saw this farm on fire and they're like, this is how this man lives. So we need to make sure we preserve that. And I thought that that was brilliant. So when they started asking if they were able to subdue the animals rather than kill them, I didn't plan for that, but I'm like, yeah, that sounds brilliant. And then after an extended period of time, like an hour or 2 hours, I ruled that the effects that were causing these animals to kind of go wild wore off, right? So the animals were fine. Again, I didn't have that planned in this game when I was coming up with it, but I wanted to reward the players for coming up with kind of a creative solution to this problem. So I think that this was a really fun way to introduce a combat encounter that also had puzzle elements, and it's very flexible. Like I said, you could start it in a tavern, you could start it directly, you could start it kind of indirectly. It's something that the players could stumble upon in pretty much any rural adjacent city, and I guess it doesn't even need to be a farm, but it's fun, and it adds an element of chaos given the random modifications. The one benefit, or the one bonus, in the way that I ran it, was because potions were the cause of these modifications, I left like 2 potion vials at the farm site that also had these random effects. So this became a plot hook for a larger campaign that's brewing in my game. But it also still had that element of randomness and that element of chance, and it was a fun way to give very, very early level players a taste of this kind of chaotic magical items. I like running more high magic games personally. I think, like, for me, gritty realism is real life, and I'd rather be able to like cast spells and do crazy stuff in a game of D&D. So that's obviously not a requirement for this adventure at all. The first drop-in adventure. With this series, I wanted to try to provide modular encounters in video form, and again, the PDF is in the description, for DMs to incorporate into their games. For a lot of them, this one included, you can also use them as one-shots to just introduce the game to a new group of players, or to provide a new experience or a new kind of setting, or just almost run D&D like a board game where you're just playing for one night to see how things pan out. Again, I've seen a lot of written content like this, but I haven't seen as much video content for it, and I wanted to try to provide that, especially given how much D&D content I consume. So if you have any feedback about this, or if you have any ideas, or if you run this game and you want to let me know how it went, please don't hesitate to comment. It would mean the world. As always, be safe. Make smart life choices.